tonight's topic is basically about consumer behavior and a little bit about the sustainable marketing, which is basically about ethics and being environmentally responsible. Okay, so they're the two things I'd like to cover tonight, and on Thursday we are going to continue with a marketing research topic. Okay, so if you have questions, you can you can just explain your question to me straight away. Okay, right. Now again, if I use examples or video clips in this presentation, and you'll be able to find them. You'll be able to find the video clips in this presentation. Look, they are not meant to be as an offense to anybody or any group. They are just meant to be, discussion materials for our class. Okay.
Sure.
Right. So we are going to cover this tonight, and the consumer behavior, basically, the marketing research topic will be discussed on Thursday. Okay. All right. Now, this is what we mean by consumer behavior. Okay. This is what we mean by consumer behavior. So it refers to any purchase for consumer or household or family. Okay. And that's what we mean by consumer behavior. So if we talk about the purchase or the transaction is aimed at meeting an individual need or a family need or household, right? That means we talk about consumer behavior. So it is in the domain of consumer behavior. Okay. Now the next one is the model of consumer behavior. Very simple. We take this model from the social psychology, basically, the SR or stimulus response model, where we actually say that as a customer, we actually a system where we receive the information from the environment, and then we will respond to, we will provide certain response back to the environment. Okay, so we receive something which is basically the stimulus, okay, and we'll give the response, right, SR model. All right, now let's zoom into the stimulus. Right, there are two types of stimulus. The first one is marketing stimulus, and the second one is others. Okay, now if you look at that, the marketing stimulus are basically the product price promotion and so on and so forth. So let's say when we are in the shopping mall, we push our trolley and we found a product. Hey, what is that? All right, so that is the stimulus from products. Okay, or when we push our trolley at the shopping mall, and then we find a product that has interesting price for us to consider, and that's again another marketing stimulus. Okay. Now, aside from that, we also have what we call as the other factors. Now, if you look at this, they are actually what we call as the macro environmental forces. Now, if you look at module 2 that I discussed last week, we actually include these guys here, right? The macro environmental forces. That means all variables in here will give pressures to our buyers, to our customers, so our customers will adjust their response to it. That is the reason why understanding the macro environmental forces are also critical. Okay. Now the next one is buyer's black box. We call them as buyer's black box because there is it is not easy to understand the buyers in what's inside the buyers. That is the reason why we call it as the buyer's black box. Okay. We do know that the buyers are affected, the buyer's decision making is affected by the characteristics of the buyer and also their process, the process that they undertake to understand, to make the decision in terms of their for their purchase. Okay. And the other thing that I'd like to highlight in here is the response of the buyers can be observed. Right. So the two things that we can observe easily are basically the stimulus, right? Okay. The stimulus and the response. They are relatively easy to observe. We can observe that, okay? But the black box itself, it's hard for us to observe, right? Okay, so that's basically the model of consumer behavior to understand how our consumers operate. Okay. The next thing I'd like to discuss briefly is the factors influencing consumer behavior. Now, I'm not going to discuss all factors in here, I just want to highlight a number of things, okay, in terms of the factors influencing consumer behavior. Okay, if you look at that, there are 4 factors affecting consumer behavior, and the first 2 are basically what we call as external factor. We can also refer to onion, where it has layers. The outer layers of our onion, in quote unquote, in this instance, is the cultural factor, right? And after we peel that layer, we will have what we call as the social. And then going deeper, we have the personal factors and psychological factors. They affect the buyer's decision making, right? The last 2 factors are actually labeled as the internal factors, right? So what it means is actually, as a consumer, our decision making is affected by any variables in here, right? Any variables in here, including our culture, gives us influence in terms of decision making to purchase something. The social factors, the personal, and also the psychological. Right now, let's have a look at just a few factors as highlights. Okay, social factor, for instance, we have what we call as the reference group. The reference group in here basically refers to the group that affects people's decision directly or indirectly. Okay. Now, one of the things that marketers need to look at in terms of reference group is the key opinion leaders. Right. Key opinion leaders are basically a group of people who have the charisma, who have the certain skills, knowledge that people refer to. Okay, in marketing, we say that these guys, the key opinion leaders in here, influence the decision making of the customers. Okay, so for instance, doctors, surgeons, audiologists, or pharmacists, for instance. Okay, or any other group of people who have the skills, knowledge, and charisma to influence people's decision. Okay, so if you look at a role in marketing that focuses on key opinion leaders, that means the job holder needs to be comfortable in discussing with the key opinion leaders, in making conversation with the key opinion leaders. Okay. All right. The next one is the personal factors. I'd like to briefly discuss the personal factors in here. One of the key things in the key personal factors is the personality. Okay, the personality of our target group is also important for us to understand, because they affect the decision making in their transaction, in their purchase. Okay, now what is personality? This is basically about the unique psychological characteristics or traits, right, that distinguish one person or a group. Okay, and they are quite stable actually, right? They are relatively stable, and people use this as kind of, in quote unquote, reference for them to respond to certain stimulus. Okay. Now, we always describe them in terms of human traits such as self-confidence, dominance, sociability, autonomy, defensiveness, permissible, and so on and so forth. All right, so they are basically the personality. Now, the interesting thing about personality is basically marketers also say that they need to understand the brand personality. Okay, what is the brand personality? Well, it is actually a specific mix of human traits that we assign to a particular brand or to a particular brand. Okay, or in other words, it is basically about if a brand turns out to be a person. Okay, you imagine it. Let's say Coca-Cola or Apple brand, right? Turns out to be a person. What kind of person this brand is, right? So it is another way to describe a brand personality. All right. So we use, in other words, we use human traits to describe the brand. Right? Is the brand female or male? Right? And what kind of characteristic that that the brand has if it turns out to be a person? Okay. Now, the interesting thing about brand personality is basically marketers try to align the brand personality that they outline to the personality of the target group, because consumers have the tendency to choose brands that are aligned with their personality. Otherwise, they feel it doesn't match. They feel imbalanced, right? They may feel it looks weird, right? And you may recall that some time ago, some brands, some car brands, for instance, try to run a campaign, "You are what you drive," for instance, try to match their personality to the target group. Okay. How do we get the information about brand personality? Well, we can do research, okay, conduct thorough research through focus group discussion and so on and so forth. And you can also look at, we can also do brainstorming if we don't have the research budget. And in the case of competitors, we can also analyze their marketing mix variables, including their product, price, place, and promotion, to understand the key messages that they try to get across, so that we can estimate, or we can at least we can predict their brand personality. Okay. If you look at the module 3 that I uploaded, you could click that link to kind of practice for you in terms of understanding if that ice cream turns out to be a person, what kind of person Magnum is. Right. The next one is psychological factor. Now, psychological factor, one of the things that I'd like to highlight in terms of psychological factor is the concept motivation. Motive is actually reflecting a need that is sufficiently pressing for that person, so that person needs to seek satisfaction. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about motivation is the Maslow's hierarchy of need theory, or motivation theory. Okay. Maslow suggests that human being would fulfill the physiological needs, and then after that, they would elevate it to the next level. So after fulfilling these needs, okay, they would actually elevate to the next level, and the next level, until the final level, the self-actualization level. Okay, so that's what Maslow theory is all about. Okay, physiological needs is actually about hunger, thirst, kind of basic things that we need to fulfill to operate as human being. Okay. And then the next one is the safety needs, which is basically about security or protection. That includes shelter, for instance. Okay. And then social need, which is about the sense of belonging, right? We belong to this group, we belong to that club, and so on and so forth. And love, for instance, another one. Esteem need is actually about the self-esteem of the person, their status, their recognition, right? To be able to establish ourselves in a certain status. Okay. And the last one is the self-actualization need, which is basically the self-development and realization. So, we have achieved all other things. The next thing that we ask ourselves is basically, what else do you want to achieve? Okay. All right. Well, sometimes we have products that are, we can also find products that are aligned to the need of the certain needs of the customers, such as Mount Franklin's, for instance, drink water, and of course, if we go back to this one, we may say that that one's fulfill the physiological need. Okay. Now, can I please ask, what about Blink H2O? Have you heard that brand before, Hans?
No, haven't heard of that one.
You haven't heard that one? Okay, fair enough. Any guess about what kind of product that is?
Bling H2O.
Yep.
I don't know, some sort of boutique or high-end fashionable water something.
You're correct, mate. So yeah, it's about water. All right. And how much do you think they charge their customers?
For is it like in a bottle?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Probably something ridiculous. $5, $10.
More.
More. We're clever marketing then.
It's 25 US, mate.
Yeah.
For one bottle of 600 or 650 milliliter of water, right?
How much did you say? 35 US.
Yeah. That much. Exactly.
Is it made of Arctic ice or something?
Well, the water is just water, and based on, if you type in your Google search box, you'll find blogs, and the blogs actually do not explain the blog. One of the blogs actually revealed that their quality is not better than American tap water.
Right.
Okay. Now, if you look at their packaging. Okay, Mount Franklin, I don't know whether Mount Franklin is available. I believe so. It is plastic bottle, but this guy, the Blink H2O, is actually using glass bottle. Right, the design looks like a bottle of wine with a cork to open it.
Yep.
Right, and the brand name, for the brand name, they use Swarovski's crystal.
Right.
Right. Okay, so if you go back here. Right, there may be two possible needs for those who buy this brand. Okay, well, they may be thirsty, all right, but there may be another reason why they buy. Right, either a social need, right, sense of belonging. I belong to that status, or I belong to that club or that group, or kind of self-esteem as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So hopefully that gives you an illustration in terms of needs, and based on the hierarchy of needs theory, and that drives people purchasing certain brand. Okay. Right. The next one is the learning theory. Still in this psychological. It is in the psychological factor, and based on the learning theory, people say that our behavior is learned. Right. So there are stages in terms of learning behavior. There are some drives to drive us that trigger us to behave certain way, and we also have the stimulus, cues, responses, and finally we reinforce that behavior. Okay, to adopt that certain behavior. Okay. Another one is beliefs and attitudes, which is basically about descriptive thoughts. Okay, and in terms of attitude, is actually about the consistent favorable and unfavorable evaluation. Okay, which is basically about the feelings. Okay, now in terms of belief and attitude, people say that it is hard for us to change the core attitudes. We may be able to influence the secondary attitudes. Okay, so for instance, globally, universally, we say that we believe that we must work so we can earn something for a living. Okay, that's the core belief, core attitudes. Okay, and it's hard to change that. So what we can do is to influence the secondary belief or the secondary attitude. Yep. What about if we offer you something to work smarter with mobile device, for instance, right? So that's how people like Apple actually try to reduce their to try to influence the attitude of the customers, right? They influence the secondary attitude of the customers, not the core attitude of the customers. Right, so in brief, knowing the customers better basically helps us to understand how we can outline our strategy. Right, we can design our marketing mix better. We can monitor the progress of our brand, our business, and so on and so forth. Right, so that's the reason why we use a range of concepts or models to try to understand our consumer better. Okay, right. Well, that's the one that I just spoke about. The Blink H2O. So that's their design basically. And well, look, some people say, well, they are, as you mentioned, ridiculously expensive. But for the other people, for the target market, well, it's my water. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now the next thing that I'd like to discuss is the buyer decision process. Okay, buyer decision process basically has several stages. All right. The first one is the need recognition and awareness. This is the stage where people are aware of the problem. Okay, they're aware of the problem. Okay, and then which is normally about the gap. Okay, which is normally about the gap. Okay, so they're aware of the gap. The gap between what? The gap of what? The gap between the desired stage, and the actual stage. Okay, well, there's a gap. Okay, either hungry or thirsty, right? They drive people's needs. Okay, they drive people to understand. Okay, there's a problem here, right? Because there's a gap. Okay, this is what I want. This is the desired state, and this is the current condition that I have. Okay, based on that, then we expect our consumers to do what we call as the information search, or this is about the research. Okay, they do some research. Okay, to find out the information, help them solving their problem. Okay, now the research or the information that they research basically revolves around four sources, but the major ones I'm going to talk about in here are basically these two. The first one is commercial source. Okay, the commercial source actually includes the marketing messages, including advertising, website, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what we call as the commercial search. Okay. The next one is actually about the personal or network source. Right. So if consumers, when in their research, they may talk to their family members, right? They may talk to their friends, okay, or relatives. Okay, so if they do that, they actually use personal network as their source, right? Now, the interesting thing in here is basically commercial and personal source have different roles in helping consumers making decision. Okay, commercial source basically is the official source of for customers to do research, right? So imagine if you want to buy a car, for instance, you do some Google search, right? You get websites of number of car brands, either Toyota, Honda, BMW, Mercedes, and so on and so forth, right? So that provides you with the official information, okay? Now, in terms of personal network source, it is actually more convincing than commercial, right? Than the commercial source, because you will depend on your, you'll listen to your family's advice, your friend's advice, especially your friend or family member has the experience in using certain brand, okay? So both of them actually have different function in terms of influencing consumer decision making, okay? Now, the outcome of information search is option. So our customers will have options as the outcome of their research, right? And then based on the outcomes, they will do based on these options. They will do evaluation of alternatives. This is where they juggle the information. They evaluate everything, right? They evaluate they evaluate the options. Okay, and what are the things that they evaluate? Anything in regards to the pluses and minuses of each option, right? What are the elements that they look at? Well, they look at everything: the product, the price, right? The dealership, the salesperson, okay, the brand, the location, right? Everything. Everything that the customers will evaluate everything, right? The payment option, right? Any critical considerations for depending on the industry as well. Okay, and then we come to the purchase decision, right? So they purchase that, they make the action to purchase that, right? Along the way of their decision in purchasing something, the customers may change their mind, right? This is the reason why some, car salesmen may still influence the customers. Hey, look, my brand has this and that and that. Why don't you come here and do the test drive with me? Okay. Along the way of the test drive, the salesperson will try to influence the customers again. Okay. Now the last one is post-purchase evaluation, which is basically about evaluating the purchase. Okay. In terms of evaluating the purchase, there are two possibilities in here. Okay, whether the customers are satisfied. Okay, if the customers are satisfied, basically it is reinforcing their decision making. Okay, yep, I'm happy with my decision. Right, it was a good decision I made, or not satisfied. Okay, well, I regret my decision. Okay, all right. Look, in real life, do you think consumers will always go through these 5 stages in making decision? What do you think, Hans?
Probably depends on what their gap is. If it's a repeated gap and they've been through the process before, they may well just jump straight to purchase of the same product again and again.
Wow, fantastic! Right, that's correct, mate. All right, so not everything, right? Our consumers may not purchase, may not go through everything, go through all stages in here, all right? It depends on the purchase, as you mentioned, right? So what kind of purchase that requires them to go through everything? Well, people say customers will use extended decision-making process if the purchase has high risk. Okay, risk in terms of what? Well, risk in terms of financial risk, or risk in terms of social. If the social risk is also high, they are going to go through every single stage in here comprehensively, right? So all stages, right? Comprehensively, they will go through all stages comprehensively. Okay. Now, the other one is basically on the other end, they will, if it is something that they normally purchase, right? They will do what we call as habitual decision making, right? They've bought it already, right? The risk is low, okay? The risk is low, so they've got the experience in purchasing this product, okay? Therefore, they just buy the product. They may skip, as a result, they may skip some stages, a couple of stages, 2-3 stages. Okay, let's say 2-3 stages, right? They may be aware of the need, like breakfast cereal, for instance. Well, I'm running out of breakfast cereal. That is at the stage where they are aware of the need. Okay, they are aware of the problem. Okay, do they do some Google research? I don't think so. All right. Yeah, I don't think our customers do that. Okay, they may just go to the local grocery store or local supermarket. All right, and do they evaluate the alternative? Maybe. All right, if there's a new brand or just launched, or if they find, oh, this brand interesting, this brand is on special. Why don't I try it? Let me check. Okay, so they may do a little bit of evaluation of alternative, right? And then they purchase, and that's it. Are they going to evaluate it, like satisfied, dissatisfied, and so on and so forth? Well, probably just a little. Okay. Now, in between extended decision-making process and habitual decision-making process, we have what we call as the moderate decision-making. Okay, decision-making. Oops, typo. Process. And in the case of moderate, okay, we say that the risk is moderate risk. Okay, in terms of financial, in terms of social, they are moderate. Okay, so what do consumers do? They will still evaluate all stages, but not comprehensively. Right? They may look at those things, they may go through everything, okay, but not comprehensively. Okay. Well, look, we may also need to recognize that consumers may have, relativity in this instance. Some consumers may say purchasing a mobile device is quite expensive, therefore they do thorough research, especially if it's the first time. Okay, or purchasing a laptop, for instance, for some consumers it may be high risk, but some other consumers say, well, look, I know what I want to buy. I think I've been hearing about this and that, so the risk is they go through all stages, but just briefly. Okay, for them it's okay to spend. Okay, I'm happy to spend $1,000 or $1,000, and yeah, I'm happy with that. And risk is moderate. It's not that high. It's not that low either. Okay, right. So hopefully that gives you a bit of illustration. Therefore, as we discussed before, consumers may not go through all stages. They may skip 2-3 stages. Okay, and just and make decision. Okay. All right. So that's basically the consumer decision process. Okay. Now there is a video in here. I think the first link in here actually shows you a summary of the decision making process that include those 5 stages. Okay. Now just briefly about the roles in buying process. Consumers might take multiple roles. They may be the initiator, the influencer, decider, or the buyer, and also the user, right? They may, or let's say if we look at a kid, for instance, the kid may initiate to purchase something when the kid talks to the mother. Mom, I want lollies, for instance. And mother in here would become the influencer. Well, not lolly, let's buy biscuit, for instance, all right? And mom will be the decider, the buyer as well, okay? And the biscuit that they purchase will be eaten by everybody in the family. So that means the kid will become the user, mother will also become the user, and probably the father as well, okay? So that's basically the roles in terms of buyer decision-making process. For new product, we have a different model in terms of understanding the buyer decision process. Okay, we have the awareness, interest, evaluation, trial, and adoption. Now, if you look at that, it is quite a long journey if you launch new products, okay, for our consumers to adopt our new products, okay? Therefore, marketers try to find ways to shortcut the roadmap in here, right? Therefore, in fast-moving consumer goods, for instance, or in consumer packaged products, marketers try to run the sampling activity to stimulate trial and as well as awareness, interest, and evaluation by the consumers. And hopefully, by then, the consumers can make a quick decision to adopt the new products. Okay. Well, of course, in the if we a marketer of a car brand, we are not going to run the sampling trial, the sampling to induce trial. We invite customers to come to do the test drive. That helps us to shortcut the process for the customers to adopt new product. Okay. And actually, there are several factors for customers to consider. Whether they purchase a new product or not, or whether they adopt a new product or new innovation or not, okay? And we have these 5 factors that affect them. The first one is relative advantage, right? The likelihood for them to adopt new innovation is quite high if the benefit of the new innovation is stronger or more superior to the existing product that they've been using, okay? And the second one is compatibility. If it is actually higher, the likelihood for the customers to adopt it is quite high. If it is in line with their values, in line with the experience, okay, in line with the lifestyle of the customers, right? So it is quite high. The likelihood for the customer to adopt it is quite high. Now, in terms of complexity, if the product is quite difficult to understand, then it will drop the likelihood of the customers to adopt it, okay? So they need to be able to understand how to use it, to understand the benefits. Okay, and the next one is the visibility, which is basically about trial on limited basis. Okay, the harder for the customers to try the product in the limited basis, the likelihood for the customers to adopt it would drop. Okay, so that's the reason why some products may be, may invite customers to come to the dealer and trial using it. Okay, and the next one is communicability, which is basically about whether the customers can communicate the benefit to the others or not. They can feel it, they can tell the difference and communicate it to the others or not. All right. Now, some product categories may find it hard to communicate the benefit. All right. If you look at vitamin and dietary supplement companies, for instance, the consumers may find it hard. Okay, yes, I've taken your vitamin C. What does it mean? Does it mean I will live 10 years longer? Does it mean I can jump from one building to the other building and so on and so forth? Does it mean I can live until 100 years? Right? Well, yeah, it may be hard for the customers to communicate the benefits. Okay, that affects how marketers respond to it in terms of helping the customers to communicate the benefits. Right, briefly about the adoption of innovation. Now, before we move further, can I just stop there? So we can still record it, and please click the same link for us to come back to the meeting room. Okay.
Okay.
Right, thanks a lot, Hans. Thanks.
Okay.